Gladstone Villa was a large, 3-storey property situated in the old mining town of Bargoed in South Wales. In the 1970s, the occupying family bore witness to chilling paranormal activity. Using genuine eyewitness accounts from the family, we present the case, The Haunting of Gladstone Villa. Light a candle, dim the lights, let's open the case. Bargoed was once a small market town, but following the opening of a colliery and the increase in demand for Welsh coal, the town and its people began to prosper. As the town was beginning to rapidly expand, new buildings were created, and it was during the early 1900s that Gladstone Villa was constructed. In all, 6 different families lived in Gladstone Villa over the years, and our story focuses on the 6th family to have resided there, the family of a man called Andrew Dexter. Andrew's mother, Caroline, moved into the property with her parents, Bill Higgs, a retired miner, and Rita Higgs, a housewife, around the year 1960, when Caroline was about 10 years old. When Caroline was around 15 in 1965, she began to work at a bakehouse. There were rumours that the flower room of the bakehouse was haunted by the spirit of a hooded monk. However, Caroline states that she never saw nor heard of anything paranormal whilst working there. Caroline met a man called Douglas Dexter, and they dated for 3 years before getting married in 1968. Caroline and Douglas did not yet have a home of their own, so Douglas moved into Gladstone Villa. It was in August of 1969 that Andrew was born. After a short period of normality, the paranormal activity began. The following events took place over the best part of a decade. Andrew himself states that the activity was not constant as seen in popular films. It was sporadic, and the entire family tried to rationalize the events they experienced. The activity was too profound, however, and the sheer number of eyewitnesses makes this a truly compelling case of paranormal activity. One evening, the whole family settled down to watch television after dinner. All of a sudden, a loud thud emanated from the upstairs of the home. The family sat in shock for a moment, having heard the unexpected and unfamiliar sound. A tense, uneasy silence filled the room. Caroline pointed out that it sounded like something or someone fell out of the attic door and onto the upstairs landing. Her words hung in the air for a moment before Bill decided to investigate the disturbance. Bill climbed the stairs, the very real worry of an intruder in the back of his mind. He found the attic door wide open, but nothing out of place. He searched every room in the villa, but failed to find the source of the disturbance. Returning downstairs, he, along with the rest of the family, tried to carry on with their evening. As they did, the mysterious event stayed firmly in the back of everyone's mind. As the family went to bed and the protection of lights diminished, Bill and Rita, who had just fallen asleep in the main bedroom, were awoken by the unmistakable sound of footsteps emanating from the dark. Douglas was working night shifts, and Andrew wasn't even old enough yet to walk. Bill wondered if it was Caroline. Bill made a terrifying discovery. The footsteps were coming from within the room. Familiar floorboards creaked as if a person with mass was stood upon them. Bill froze and tried to study the room, his eyes beginning to adjust to the darkness of the room. He determined there was no explanation for the sounds. He turned on the lamp on the bedside table, and nobody was there. Bill checked in on his daughter, Caroline, to ensure that she was sleeping, returning to his room when he was confident all was well. The peculiar noises had now ceased, and Bill managed to sleep after some time had passed. A few nights later, the family had gone to bed. Rita and Bill were just about to fall asleep when they heard the footsteps again. They both lay for a few minutes in the dark, listening carefully to the unnerving sounds. They both agreed that the sounds appeared to be coming from their room. Bill again reached over and turned on the light. Again, nothing was out of the ordinary. The footsteps stopped for a moment and then returned, this time with an odd, dragging sound. As suddenly as the sounds had started, they ceased. Bill and Rita were able to return to sleep. However, they both believed something incredibly strange was happening in their home. Shortly afterwards, one night, whilst watching television, Bill stood up and turned the volume down. The rest of the family looked at Bill, who was pointing at the ceiling. The whole family began to hear loud footsteps coming from the master bedroom above them. They were all starting to believe that the house was now haunted. Sadly, Douglas and Caroline's marriage began to break down. Andrew firmly states that the ghost had nothing to do with the breakup. They were both young when they married, and as with some young marriages, it just wouldn't work out between them. Douglas moved out, but continued to be an excellent father to Andrew. As mentioned before, the activity was sporadic. Electrical goods began to be manipulated. Plugs were yanked from their sockets in empty rooms. Andrew distinctly remembers watching a plug being forcibly removed from the socket by an unseen force, and the wires were also visibly pulled frequently. The lights would be turned off, the click of the switch heard as the affected room was plunged into darkness. Just like many people in the 1970s, Bill enjoyed playing his music through his record player. During certain songs, the record player would inexplicably stop and turn off. The TV was sometimes affected by the entity. However, when Rita was watching anything religious, the entity would be surprisingly silent. The activity, if anything, was becoming rather irritating, and so the family contacted the police. They wanted the officers to investigate their home to see if any reasonable explanation could be given for the activity. When the police entered Gladstone Villa, they investigated room by room, but could find no explanation as to the activity. Whilst they were upstairs, the officers were asked to look in the attic. They climbed the stairs, but reportedly stopped at the threshold of the door, afraid of going in. The police poked their heads around the door, scanned the room quickly, and closed the door. When the officers left, they tried to convince the family that they must have been the victim of some sort of practical joke, as they had witnessed no activity for themselves, but for the fear of going into the attic. Ivy France was a close friend of Andrew's grandmother, Rita. Rita informed Ivy about the strange activity going on and was curious to see if she could find a rational cause for it. After investigating the main bedroom, Ivy France stated to Rita that the sounds were the result of the vibrations from passing traffic. Allegedly, as soon as she said this, both women heard loud footsteps within the room. The spirit was intelligent. It was as though it was offended by Ivy's explanation for the events. Both women searched for the source of the sounds, but again failed to find the cause. Andrew states that this event was so powerful that Ivy believed in the paranormal from that day on. Later, she suggested to Rita that the family allow a medium to come to the property to see what might be uncovered. She also suggested to Rita that the family get in touch with the local press. Rita refused. She feared mockery and ridicule if the press became involved. On Ivy's advice, the family did contact a medium named John Matthews. When he arrived, he sat in the living room with the rest of the family and began asking questions about their lives, jobs, and most importantly, their paranormal experiences within the property. Once John was happy that he had all the information he needed, he stood up and challenged the spirit to knock back if it could hear him. He knocked, and sure enough, from the ceiling above them came a knock. John started to ask questions. He was able to obtain a response from the spirit through a series of knocks on the ceiling. John then attempted to channel the spirit, hoping to get some answers for the family. He was in a trance-like state for some time until he came to. He informed the family that there was indeed a spirit here, but unfortunately the spirit would not give up its name. John stated that the spirit was earthbound and was once human and had unfinished business in life. After hearing this, the family decided to get in touch with the church and ask for a priest to bless their home. The church responded by sending a priest named Graham Jones. Andrew's family remembers Graham arriving at the property. Upon entry, and whilst holding his cross, he uttered, "Be gone, demon, and dwell at your appointed place. Leave this house and the family alone." He then recited prayers and visited each room in the house to try and drive the spirit out. Allegedly, when Graham left, he said, "Watch the baby," of course alluding to Andrew. Caroline states that for a while the activity did cease, and the family began to settle down and tried to live somewhat normal lives. However, the spirit returned, and it began to manifest itself visibly to the family. One night, as Andrew, Caroline and Bill watched television and Rita read, Caroline began to feel an unease. She felt like someone or something was watching her. At that very moment, something caught her eye in the corner of the living room. She turned her gaze towards the disturbance to find that, to her horror, a hooded monk was stood behind Rita as she read. Caroline, panicked by what she saw, recoiled and let out a gasp. The figure disappeared that very moment, before any other family members had time to see it. Caroline stated that the apparition was only visible for a moment. After this incident, the activity began again. The family owned a large tin bath that was usually hung up on the wall. One day, the family heard a huge crash and found it on the floor in the bathroom. The nail securing the bath was still in the wall. Fred Davies, an ex-miner and close friend of Bill's, would frequently visit the family. One evening, whilst they chatted next to an open fire, there was a huge bang. The bang was so loud that Fred ducked his head in anticipation of something coming through the ceiling. This was the first time that Fred had experienced anything unusual in the home. He of course knew about the phenomenon, but had not seen anything firsthand. Fred and the family searched the entire property for the source of the noise, but again failed to find the cause. Soon after, Fred had an experience of his own. Bill enjoyed gazing out of the landing window as it overlooked the town, and on occasion Fred would join him. Whilst deep in conversation, Fred felt something brush against him, and to his amazement, turned around to discover that nobody was there. The family owned 2 cats. Both cats were terrified of the main bedroom. The family one day found both cats within the room, frozen with fear. One cat was in the corner, unable to move, and one was behind the fireplace in the room, trying to climb up inside the chimney. After this event, one of the cats refused to eat and drink, and sadly passed away. Once Andrew was a little older, he too could recall seeing and experiencing things for himself. He states that he saw the brown cables for the TV being pulled, the ceiling lights being pulled and manipulated by unseen hands, and heard footsteps almost every night. One night, curiosity perhaps got the best of Andrew, and he decided to see if he could experience something for himself. He entered the main bedroom, turned on the light, and lay down on the bed. After scanning the room for a moment, he found himself looking out of the window. Nothing happened for some time, and that is when he felt something climb, or rather, slide onto the bed with him. He felt the mattress compress, its springs audibly tightening under the extra weight. Andrew's gaze was still fixed on the window. He was fearful of what he might see on the bed with him. Eventually, Andrew plucked up the courage to look to where he felt the movement, but he saw nothing. Andrew ran downstairs. He told everyone in the lounge what had happened. Upon investigation, dog-sized paw marks were discovered on the bed. Andrew states that they were far too big to have been mistaken for the cats. Andrew would later discover that Bill once owned a black Labrador called Toby. Due to the powerful bond both Toby and Bill once shared, Bill kept Toby's ashes under the bed. Could the ghost of Toby the dog be a protective spirit? Rita also had her fair share of experiences. She always woke up before Bill and made a cup of tea. One morning, she awoke as usual and began her routine. When she came back upstairs and into the bedroom, the door to a small closet forcibly swung open. Rita immediately left the room. On occasion, she also felt as if something had been pulled from beneath her foot. It was just like she had stepped onto someone's dress, which was pulled quickly from underneath her. As the activity intensified and the occurrences became more frequent, Andrew recalls how the spirit also became more aggressive. So aggressive, in fact, that the whole family, apart from Bill, began to sleep downstairs with the lights on. One day, Bill came down the stairs holding a bottle, which had been thrown at him by an unknown force, missing him by mere inches. Andrew recalls this event vividly. Another morning, Andrew woke up needing to use the bathroom, only to find that the door seemed to be jammed. After several failed attempts of opening it, he asked for Bill's help, but even Bill couldn't open it. Bill looked down at Andrew and stated in a hushed tone, "He's in there." Andrew pressed his ear to the door and shockingly heard what he describes as Gregorian chanting coming from the other side of the door. A few moments later, the door swung freely open, as if it was never jammed. Ivy France, who witnessed hearing the footsteps in the bedroom, told her son Charles about the activity. He, along with 2 other men, Colin Evans and Ed Edwards, came to Gladstone Villa and conducted a séance in the main bedroom. Colin claims that they heard a whooshing sound, and he himself felt as if he was pinned against a wall. Ed claims that shortly after the attack they could see a marking in the wall that seemed to materialise as if from thin air. All three men claimed to have seen the monk in the bedroom by the window. Another family friend bore witness to the activity. A man called Derek Harwood came to the property often. On one occasion, whilst Rita was cooking in the kitchen, Derek was painting the lounge door. He and Rita could hear loud bangs from upstairs. The bangs appeared to become louder and louder, as if in protest to the paint. Derek was determined to finish the job though, and carried on despite the noises. It is interesting to note that a spirit which has an attachment to a property will almost always make itself known when renovations are happening. Usually it is in protest to the house being altered in some way, as in some cases the spirit still believes the property belongs to them. Later, Bill and Caroline heard a child crying from upstairs. They entered the main bedroom and shockingly discovered that the disturbing cries were coming from the built-in wardrobe. The family decided to move out in the summer of 1978. On the final night, the family packed their belongings into black bags and placed them in the hallway ready for the morning. Caroline, Rita and Andrew slept downstairs with the lights on, whilst Bill went upstairs to bed. Caroline awoke in the night to hear the unmistakable sound of the bags being disturbed. This made her sit upright and stare anxiously at the closed door leading to the hallway. As Caroline stared at the doorknob began to slowly twist. Caroline shouted out in absolute terror. Rita and Andrew were startled awake. As soon as Caroline had shouted out, the door handle sprung back to its original position. The family opened the door and checked. As had happened so many times before, nothing was out of place. Andrew and his family left the house and the spirits within, but the house never really left Andrew. He continued to research the house and the land surrounding it for any sort of explanation. The following are the discoveries that he made. In 1924, Michael, Evelyn and their young son Alvin moved into Gladstone Villa. They were the second family to own the property. Unfortunately, young Alvin sadly passed away at only 4 months of age. Could the crying that both Bill and Caroline heard be Alvin calling out to his mother? Andrew also believes that the spirit of Evelyn still resides in the property. He believed that she saw Andrew when he was a newborn and attached herself to him, thinking Andrew was in fact Alvin, her son. Could it have been Evelyn's dress that Caroline kept catching with her foot? Finally, directly opposite the property is an old club called the Raffer Club. The building was constructed in the 17th century. Andrew discovered that the building contains a priest hide. Could the monk that was seen be a priest who hid to try and avoid persecution? After Andrew and his family left the property, it was bought by 2 Italian businessmen. They converted the property into a hotel. Andrew decided to celebrate his 40th birthday at the hotel, and during his party he asked some of the staff that worked there if they had seen any activity. They confirmed that they indeed had. Lights would be turned on and off, footsteps could be heard from within the various bedrooms in the property, and shadowy figures were also seen. Andrew was told that room 5 was particularly active, and that the apparition of a bride in white had been seen by multiple people. The hotel closed its doors for the final time in 2004. It was then sold and became a care home for the elderly called Ty Park, which it remains to this day. We dedicate this episode to Derek Harwood, who sadly passed away this year. We hope that you have enjoyed this story. If you have, please like and subscribe, as you won't want to miss our next case.